Is your significant other enmeshed with their family of origin? Do you feel like that relationship is just too close, too demanding, and it overshadows you and your relationship? It overshadows your wants and needs? If your partner is enmeshed with their family of origin, it is likely that you feel neglected, overlooked, frustrated, overwhelmed. You might be lied to about certain things because your partner knows that they're going to get you angry, so therefore your partner's hiding them from you. Everything might feel like a no-win. This is really a hard place to be, but there is help and hope. Today I'm going to talk very briefly about what enmeshment is and how it comes from our roles in our childhood and how your role might be related here. So that gives you a bit of a sense about why this might be happening. But then we'll talk about what you can do about it. And then the what you can do about it can be a tricky question because very often it feels like, no, my partner has to do something about it and they won't. So that's a bit of a tricky question and we'll come back to it. So people often confuse enmeshment with dependence, but it's really more about the inability to individuate, the inability to be who you fully and truly are. With enmeshment, emotions are like tangled up. Nobody knows who's responsible for whose emotion, right? Or maybe one person feels responsible for everybody's, another person doesn't even feel responsible for their own. And then the same thing goes with other more practical responsibilities. So there can be an element where responsibilities are out of sort of the normal hierarchy when a child is parentified and takes care of things that should be the parent's job, right? Or a child grows up trained that they are responsible for keeping dad from getting mad or keeping mom from getting depressed. So in families with dysfunctional elements, there's almost always very rigid roles. And I do have a few other videos on this if you want to learn more about it, but sort of a typical role might be the golden child or the hero child. They're the one who excels and makes the family proud. Then there's the scapegoat child, who is the one who, it's the opposite. They get blamed with everything. They're the real problem in the family, and that role can keep the family from really addressing core issues that might be happening on the parenting level. The lost child, the mascot, the codependent, right? So there's a number of roles, but when we are stuck in a role, we are not individuated. We are not being fully who we are, and we learn these roles young. So you're probably thinking, I want help from my enmeshed spouse. How is this going to help me? So what I would recommend is that it's worth taking a little time, little detective energy, to think about what role did you have growing up and what role did your spouse have? Now, I think for many people watching this video who are worried about how much time their spouse is spending taking care of other family members, we can guess what role that person had, right? Probably the caretaker child or the hero child, the one who was responsible for taking care of other people's everything. But looking at your own role that you grew up with will, I think, also provide insight. So if you grew up the lost child, right? So the lost child is the one that the family basically ignores because we have this hero child that we pay a lot of attention to, and we have this scapegoat who needs a lot of attention and care. And those other kids, oh, they're just fine, right? So if you grew up the lost child where you basically were ignored a good portion of time, this behavior of your partner might be really upsetting on a very core level. So this is not in any way to blame the dynamic. Blame is also an enmeshment issue, to be honest. So we got to take blame out of this. But as a lost child, you might have grown up not speaking up for your own needs. And that might be a piece that's being replicated now. At some point, I could do a video on how all these different roles will work in a relationship. So drop me a note if you think I should do that video. But for the moment, do some investigation in an open-minded way. Are there things you learned in your role that are holding you back from helping to address the situation for yourself, not necessarily for your partner? Is it okay for you to have needs? Is it okay for you to have wants and desires? And if not, Why not? Right? So, after you do that sort of investigation for yourself or with your spouse, this can be great stuff for a conversation. If you want to acknowledge the impact that your upbringing had on how you either are or aren't addressing the situation, right? But more importantly, what I see a lot is that the person who is married to somebody who is obviously enmeshed with their family, their focus tends to be, how do I get them to see the problem? How do I get them to see that it's not good for them? And I understand that because you probably are observing it and seeing that it's not good for them. Probably many therapists would agree with you. But the problem is, people don't like to hear what they're doing wrong. People don't necessarily like to see it. And if this is very old, ingrained behavior, they may not be able to see it for a while. But I think we fall into that approach of, I need to get them to see how it's not good for them because we feel like we are not allowed to have needs. We feel that we can't say, hey, this isn't okay with me. Hey, I need more attention, right? We are trained not to do that. So I want to talk about this piece a little bit more, and then how that ties to boundaries, which are basically about knowing who I am, knowing who you are, knowing where the separation is, where the connection is, right? And how all of that is integral with the issue of enmeshment and healing from enmeshment. So, with regard to you being allowed to have needs, you are, and you're allowed to have wants and desires. It doesn't have to all be about basic needs, right? But for you to really look into, what impact does this have on you? How often are you left feeling unimportant, feeling like you don't matter, or feeling like demands are being made on you that you don't want to fill, but somebody else is committing you to do it, so you have to do it, right? How often are you falling into that trap of either resentment or loneliness or frustration, right? It can be frustrating watching somebody doing the same thing over and over again. So, really understanding the impact on you and then approaching the topic with your spouse from that point of view. So, talking to them about some changes you would like to see because of how things are making you feel. And I did do a short video on that exact topic, which I will link here, which I think will be super helpful for you to watch. So let's come back to the issue of boundaries. So if the opposite of enmeshment is individuation, and individuation is about, like, I get to be who I am, right? And if I understand boundaries and I know where I end and where you begin, then I can take care of my own emotions. You can take care of your emotions, which doesn't mean we don't acknowledge the interdependence between us, particularly when we're in a close relationship. We can be interdependent, but I am not responsible for somebody else's happiness. I am not responsible to keep somebody else from getting angry. That's not my responsibility. So I can be kind and considerate and caring, but still understand that I can take care of my own needs and desires while being considerate of yours, right? There's a balance here. So this is complicated stuff, and I do have an entire program on boundaries you might be interested in. But before that, I also have a quiz. It's the Boundary Personality Quiz. And the quiz highlights what a positive core statement is that you might have about yourself that impacts how you do or don't set boundaries, that impacts how you do or don't speak up for your own needs. And this positive core statement is tied to a negative core belief, and it's in healing the negative core belief that you will truly be able to set boundaries with more ease, more confidence. And then when you're talking with your spouse who's part of this enmeshed family, you can say, okay, hun, but this is what I need in the relationship. These are the boundaries around which I'm willing to interact with your family. These are my boundaries. I'd love to have you on board with my boundaries, and I'd love to have you be the one to speak to your family about this, because that's sort of what would be advised in typical family therapy. Like, the hierarchy would be the person whose family of origin it is would be the one who talked with their family of origin about changes. But that doesn't always happen. Your spouse may not be willing to do it. that role they grew up in may be too ingrained. It might have such a strong hold on them, they can't even conceive of doing it, in which case you can do it. So obviously, if your partner is willing to talk about this in an open way, when you can approach it from the point of view of how you feel, not what they should or shouldn't do, not what their family should or shouldn't do, but from the point of view of how you feel, boundaries you'd like to set, that should help the dialogue go much more effectively, smoothly, right? And if you have a partner who is like completely unwilling to really look at any of this, then couples counseling might help. And if there's a refusal to do that, then it still comes back to what do you need to do to live the life you deserve. All right, I hope this was helpful. Please do comment below. If you have a question, specific example you'd like me to use or address, feel free, note it in the comments. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not subscribed, and check out my other enmeshment videos. Thanks so much. Bye.